Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Austin Friends of Traditional Music Online. My name is Gary Mortensen, and in just a few minutes, we're going to be talking to a very dynamic and talented member of the Austin, Texas acoustic music scene. But if you don't know about the AFTM, we're an organization that has been around since 1974, promoting all forms of traditional music in the Austin area. We put on jams, concerts, a wonderful festival in October normally, all kinds of events that are very successful normally. But of course, this year with the pandemic, things have changed drastically. We can't hold our jams. We had to cancel our festival. We hope, of course, that is different next year. But what we're doing for right now is getting together with some of our musical friends online, hear what they've been up to, what they're doing online, if anything, and it's been a lot of fun. Maybe we'll even get a musical performance today, because the gentleman we're going to be talking to is a very talented musician. He's a multi-instrumentalist for sure. He is an instructor. He teaches all these musical instruments that he plays. Fine performer, playing in bluegrass bands, and he performs in a duo quite frequently. Great jam leader. He during regular times, he hosted a great Bluegrass Open Mic every month at the New World Deli. He's a very busy guy, a very talented guy. And the thing I'm really jealous of is the fact that he has the same name as a Major League Hall of Fame player.
There you go.
So I think you know who I'm talking about at this point. I'm talking to Mr. Eddie Collins. Eddie, how are you doing today?
Doing great, Gary. Thanks for inviting me to this. And yeah, I'm sure all your baseball old-time music fans put the two together there. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, you appeal to both crowds, and that's part of your universal appeal. Well, I think you've been in Austin longer than I have, but I don't really know the early part of your musical story. Where did the Eddie Collins story begin?
Well, going all the way back, as a kid, I always wanted to play guitar, and I was one of those lucky kids that had parents that thought that was the worst idea they could ever come up with. So it took a number of years until I got my own paper route, finally bought a guitar, and within a few months, I was actually playing gigs. And started out like a lot of kids of my era, a little bit more on the rock and roll side, although there were people leading the way. If you think about the Byrds, they were doing Pete Seeger songs, Turn, Turn, Turn. So indirectly, I didn't know it at the time, but I was getting a little dose of old time music. Through the blues, I was getting to know people like Robert Johnson and stuff, and some of the old time. And then this song called Dueling Banjos came out, and I wasn't playing banjo, but we had a country band together. So we figured somebody had to start learning to play banjo to answer all the requests for dueling banjos. And so I put together probably the world's worst rendition, and the crowd, of course, after the many beers that they would consume, thought it was just great. So, but it did get me into banjo, and within a couple of years, I started teaching at a music store. And
where in the U.S. was this happening?
This happened to be in Ventura, California, and I was born and finished high school in Northern Virginia, but out in California, I happened to. So that's the old story about my parents moved a lot when I was a kid, but I always found them. And I found them in Ventura when I was a young kid. And just a little sidebar, there's a great bass player here in town named Bob Poole. It turns out we both were in fourth grade at the same elementary school in Ventura, California, and didn't know it until years later when we both are here in Austin. Because we had two fourth grade classes and the two didn't intermingle. So
I see.
So that's a little sidebar. But
the magnetism of Austin drew you both here, I guess.
Kind of the music scene, and yeah. So there were a lot of little things along the way, but the banjo was kind of a sidebar. They're just I actually went into the local music store saying, "Hey, I'd like to teach guitar here," and they said, "Well, we got 6 guitar teachers." One of them ended up being in Roger Miller's band, and another one ended up being in Clint Black's band. It's an amazing story of how these guys all went places on to big things, but they didn't need another guitar teacher. But they said, what we really need is a banjo teacher. Well, I knew Cripple Creek and about 3 other songs, so there you go. And it's really fun looking back at it, how it really evolved. I really enjoyed teaching, so it pushed me to become a better player because I had to stay better than the students, otherwise they wouldn't come back for the next lesson. So
you were
that's how
teaching
that evolved.
in California then early on, right?
I'm sorry, Gary.
Yeah, you were teaching when you were still in California, I guess.
Yes,
Huh?
yeah. And again, even though I was playing a lot, teaching's I've always been very dedicated to it. And I kind of put the teaching first, gig second, where a lot of musicians certainly have that the other way around,
Yeah.
So, yeah. And then we landed in Austin here in 1992. Couple of reasons. By this time I had gotten a master's in education. I was teaching while I was also performing on the side. And Austin was the state board of education this year, so I figured there were education related jobs. I'd had enough of being in the classroom. And I'd also taught education courses at a university. And so I figured there'd be possible opportunities here for that and see what I could do with the music. And as I took a few education gigs, I realized, wow, if it's going to pay that low, I might as well just go ahead and play music because I know how to make low wages playing music. So I got more involved in music and eventually just been full time here in Austin since about 95, 96, just let the education aspect go.
And you started teaching fairly soon after you got to Austin, is that right?
Not like going out and soliciting at music stores, but people would talk to me at a jam or something, and then the conversation would get going, and I ended up within a year having about 10 private students. And then you all know Danny Barnes, one of the amazing performers to do well in both bluegrass and old time music. He was leaving his teaching position at South Austin Music in 1997. And that was when the switch really flipped to where I just said, okay, I'm going for it, because he was able to direct a couple days worth of students to me. And at that point, from then on, I would, and that was at South Austin Music. And it's amazing to realize he's been gone from Austin that long, actually.
Yeah.
23 years.
When was it that you wrote your first instructional book?
Well, my very first one I wrote was while I was still in California in 1984. And but that was really just to use with my students. I didn't go through all the issues of trying to clear copyrights of songs I put in there and things. And then once I got here, I wrote a book called The Key of D for 5-string banjo, because I realized when every book would have about 1 page of playing in D or changing the tuning, and they'd have 1 page on how to play a song in C. And so I did complete books on those, and those actually got picked up by, I published them myself, but they got picked up by things like Elderly Music, Janet Davis Music, all of the big music stores that carried that kind of instruction. And those books really did pretty well. And I also had a banjo magazine that I started here with a former CTBA AFTM person, John Hood, who he was the one that convinced me, let's put out a magazine. He was essentially the publisher, the editor, and I did all the legwork. And that was kind of what put me on the national map. That magazine, 5-String Quarterly, was very well received and respected.
And there, of course, is still the Banjo Newsletter, where I've seen articles from you frequently.
So Banjo Newsletter has been around since 1974, so about 20 years before I started my magazine. I was friends with those people, so I told them, what I'm doing is different than you all. You're a monthly, we're going to be a quarterly. We're going to take a specific topic, go a little bit deeper than you can on a monthly basis, and not be quite so much like back then. As you can imagine, before the internet, they were the source of, hey, what's happening in Banjo Monthly. And so they continued to do that. It's really quite an amazing story that we didn't really view each other so much as competition, but tried to help each other out. And so when it got to the point where I realized that that 5-string quarterly was going to be all consuming, I was spending 40, 50 hours a week on that. And it was hurting my teaching and my performing. I decided to let that go. And then since then, I've been writing a monthly column for Banjo Newsletter about the past 20 some years. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. And continued to create instructional materials for several instruments, correct?
Correct. And a lot of it is kind of driven by the people I interact with, my students. I realized there was no easy play along. There were play along things. Homespun tape would have a play along things. And, but there was, so I put out a little jammer's book and then just recorded a CD of playing the basic jam songs really slow, really easy. And also just playing just the melody notes without all the extra notes around, so beginners could start to jam at a real. So that was one, but that's an example of how I would get ideas. Actually, I got a little visual aid here. This one, these have been picked up by Hal Leonard, which is a national publisher. I did a whole series of books called Smokin' Licks. And so that one, and I've got them for, this one's mandolin, and you can do the same for, that was bluegrass mandolin, bluegrass guitar. And I think part of it too is having a background in education. I always felt like I could organize things in a way that would connect with people better than some of the music instruction that I had seen out there. And that was the case. There's plenty of hot lick books, but they're just hot lick after hot lick, and I would always put them into phrases and then put them into solos and things like that. So yeah, so that been happy to the way the books have been pretty well received. Although I got to say now with everything online, as you can imagine, I go far enough back that I was revolutionary in that I offered a cassette tape to go with my book when I first started. And then it was quite a thing when I had to convert them all to CDs with my book. And now I have a lot of students, they don't have a CD player. So now I got to have online files available and things. So it's constantly a technology learning curve as you try to improve your instruction to keep up with the times.
Yeah. Now, those are the three instruments that you're teaching these days: guitar, banjo, mandolin?
Yes, and occasionally I will do upright bass because there aren't a lot of people teaching that. But usually I tell people, especially if they have any music background, for the kind of music that we're doing, you can show a lot of people just keep this going. It's the old thing about the kid. He tells his dad, well, I want to take bass, I want to get some bass lessons. So the dad takes the kid to the bass lesson, and he says, dad says, well, what'd you learn? He said, oh, I learned this, dum, dum. So that's the G. Next week, okay, what did you learn? Oh, I learned D, boom, 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 boom. They go back. The dad says, "Oh, you ready for your third lesson?" He says, "No, Dad. No, I got a gig." For our kind of music, that's all you need. So, boom, boom, boom.
That's a good story, Eddie. I haven't heard that one before. You've got a lot of video materials, I think, available. Isn't that true?
Well, so the question for all of us musicians, what do you do? It was obvious the lockdown was coming right as spring came. So I had some weddings booked. I had an annual thing with this band from Chicago that we do every year. Then some of my biggest gigs all canceled all in one short space. And I knew that people were going to, there's a mental aspect that we're all dealing with here, not being able to have all of our social contacts in person. And so early on, I started just doing gospel and inspirational videos. And those were pretty well received. And then I realized this pandemic isn't going anywhere. So then I figured, well, I'll start doing some of I've already had numerous instruction videos on there, but I really started digging deeper into that. And so now I put out 2 to 3 videos a week, and I have to rotate banjo, mandolin, because I got, you develop people who subscribe to your YouTube channel. And if you're a mandolin player, well, you don't want the next banjo video, but you want you're waiting for the next mandolin. So I got to try to keep all those people happy as I go along. So.
Yeah. Are they viewable on YouTube? Is that where you'd find them? Or
Yeah, I have
website?
a YouTube channel called Eddie Collins Music, and you go on there, and then there's the playlist. So if you're interested in banjo, you just go right up to the playlist that says banjo lessons, and the 2025 selections come up, and same for each of the other instruments. And there's even one category for humor. I've got the most popular one on there is the banjo player in a bluegrass band, where a guy's trying to explain to another person what it's like. So, yeah.
Well, we'll have to check that out. Eddie Collins Music, correct?
Eddie Collins Music YouTube channel.
Yeah. And we haven't mentioned the great Bluegrass Open Mic that you used to hope and will come back someday, we hope, I suppose.
Yes, and the thing about that is that's the New World Deli, and you, I, and Chip were talking about how great they've always been in supporting. Their support for our kind of music goes all the way back to when they first opened, even before I was around. And they, like a lot of venues, have had their ups and downs, and they were right at the point where they were going to discontinue music altogether. They just weren't getting people to come to the music. And Tom Duplessis, I guess, knew Greg, and he said, well, you should get a hold of Eddie and see what maybe he can do. And so they had tried a bluegrass night. That didn't catch on. And I said, well, let's try this open mic concept, but let's try it with bluegrass and see what happens. And kind of the rest is history. The night became a huge, they wanted me to do it every week. I just did it monthly. I felt like that would keep the interest up. And people like you and Chip, I'd always bring in a special guest. And so that would created a lot of variety. And then people come in with their songs worked up, all the way from I remember I had a student who I invited him to it. He'd only been playing like a month, and he shows up with his banjo. And I go, okay, well, I like the enthusiasm. And he got up there and he got all the way through his Cripple Creek, and people loved it. And then other times we had surprise guests, Alan Mundy or Peter Rowan have showed up, and so it's been a tremendous thing.
Yeah. And, remember what year it was when that started?
Well, I know we celebrated our 10th anniversary this spring, so it would have been 2010. That we started that.
It's really a great event. One thing I was wondering about, I know you normally have a lot of private students each week. How has the situation affected that part of your life?
Well, luckily I had, my background is with a lot of this technology. So as soon as I saw what was happening, within a week, I was up and running with, and I use Skype for most of my lessons. A couple we do FaceTime. But I knew the big difference was there's other people, if they're more of a musician and then a teacher, they just turn on the mic and say, what do you want to know? With my students, I track where they're at. And the difference is I can't just pull out the book here in the lesson. I have to know ahead of time what I'm going to be sharing with them. Have to run off those pages, email them to them, make sure they got them. So my lesson prep time is basically doubled. But I've kept, I would say I used to do on average 35 to 40 lessons. Now I'm doing 25 to 30 every week. Mm-hmm. So I'm very lucky that way, been able to maintain a pretty solid income that way.
Yeah. And of course, you have a website, which I have visited many times over the years. Is that a good way for perhaps prospective students to get in touch with you?
Sure. It has, and it's Eddie, it's Eddie Collins, EDDIE COLLINS, but it's .biz, BIZ. If you go to.com, you may like it. It's an erotic photographer in New York City.
My
So,
goodness.
Erotica art. So
Uh-huh.
be careful there. So
Your name is used in so many different endeavors, Eddie.
you
It's
know,
amazing.
I had a when I first did an album back in the 70s, I spelled my name Eddye just to be different. And in hindsight, I wish I would have kept that, because when I haven't gotten too many BMI royalties off of songs I've written, but the first 10 years of my royalties went to another Eddie Collins, and I never got them back.
Oh, no.
But had I spelled it that way, there's only one. When I went to set up a Skype account for Eddie Collins with my spelling, there were over 100, so around the world. So popular. I don't know if they're all younger than me and they liked the name and they insisted their parents named them that, or how that worked.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, it sounds like you're doing pretty darn well under the circumstances, not getting out to play in person, I suppose, these days. Huh?
No, I like many people of my age and older. I'm around immediate family that has health issues that will not allow me to, take those kind of risks.
Mm-hmm.
So I've had to look at it like, nope, can't quite get out there until things are a little more under control. So yeah, and I haven't been doing the online concerts. My performance, I would have to say, is probably gone. I do some when I do my YouTube videos. Obviously, I have to perform, but if I don't like it, I just turn it off and re-record it. Right, so it's not like a live. But some of the we've been continuing the open mic actually on, and we need to get you on that, Gary. We've had conversation, but we haven't got you to perform just yet. So the New World Deli open mic now is a virtual open mic. So I call it the Bluegrass Virtual Open Mic. And we've had, I think we're up to 22, 23 performances. And that's where you use this app called Acapella. And each person can kind of record their part, and then we kind of put them all together. But it's actually a good way to practice your live performance, because you can't stop the video in the middle, unlike in a recording studio where you could stop and fix a note or something. None of that in a live performance. So I've enjoyed that, and it's been it's really fun. It's an all or nothing. Did you like the way you did it, or you're gonna do the whole track over again? So
yeah, and there are links to those videos on your
that's
website?
one of on the YouTube channel, the Eddie Collins Music. One of the playlists is Bluegrass Open Mic.
I get it.
And you can see them all, and many of your favorite fans, your favorite performers will be there.
Uh-huh. Well, you've been busy, as you always are. Every time I've talked to you, I've been sort of amazed at the number of students that you see every week over the years, and still doing that and in front of the camera a lot. Are you getting much chance just to play for the pleasure of playing these days?
And one thing I've had to try to really force myself to do is to be disciplined about the practice, to have a purpose for when I get a few minutes to practice. I find it too easy. I just start thinking about what am I going to do in the next video, but is that really, is that going to lead to solid practice? And my right hand on both my guitar and my mandolin, I had noticed had really gone downhill a little bit since the pandemic. So I've set aside practice time to be working on that. So yeah. How about you? Have you been setting aside time?
Yeah, I do. I'm compulsive enough about playing that days don't go by where I don't play, but more structured at sometimes than others. And speaking of musical structure and stuff, I was wondering, in your formal music education that led to your master's degree, was any of it specific to music, or was it just broadly addressing education issues?
Yeah, well, I had 3 years of college music. I first just got an AA degree, like many people of my era. You were wandering aimlessly, and it's like, but I was smart enough to say, well, let's get this AA, which is 2 years of college, out of the way at a junior college. And whenever I decide to go back, I could be a little more focused. So I first tried to go back in music, and I did really well. In fact, I got accepted in the music program at UCSB, which is Santa Barbara. And, but I got to thinking, what am I going to do with this degree? I'm not a good sight reader. I can't perform on any classical instrument very well, piano or whatever. And so that's when I took a sidebar and I realized, well, I teach, I'm a good teacher, so I won't be music I teach, I'll just teach. I loved kids, and I ended up teaching elementary school, young kids, and had fun doing that. My degree was actually in technology and education, and that's when computers were when Apple first started giving an Apple, I think when I was doing it was an Apple II to each of the classrooms. And nobody in the district, some schools had all these computers and they'd just sit there because nobody knew how to use them. Apple was literally just giving you a whole computer lab to every school that would ask. And so I actually became the district coordinator for all the computer activities in the Conejo Valley out there in California. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you've been dealing with these bits and bytes and pluses and minuses for many years now, and I'm sure it's paying off. Hey, I was going to ask, is there any chance we can hear any live music from your Flying Fingers today?
Well, I gave you guys a heads up. I think that early on I did some of my videos and they were live, and I even included some singing. I haven't actually sung on a video in several months, so I'm willing to give it a try, but we'll have to see if the voice cooperates here. Whenever I'm not sure about my voice, I always have visions back to the Little Rascals, Alfalfa.
Yeah.
And him singing "I'm in the Mood for Love." Yeah, if you know that clip, that's where he goes, "I'm in the mood for," it's like can't quite get the word out. So we'll see if that happens or not. I've been lucky enough. I used to go around the country and be involved in workshops and camps. And so I always felt like I must be quite a salesman, because I would be on the same staff as people like, of course, Alan Mundy, who lives here closely, but Bill Keith, some of the world's great banjo players. And then sometimes be a camp like Steve Kaufman's camp, where there'd also be guitar players like Dan Crary or, world-class guitar players. And they'd always have an evening concert. And so I would have to play a song. And I remember specifically I was going to be playing in front of Bill Keith one time, just a phenomenal banjo player. And you're going to be as nervous as heck. So the thing I caught on early on, there was no point for me to try to play fast, having all these great banjo players. So I tried to find a way to make the banjo sound like a kind of a more mellow instrument. So we'll give you one of those if we can here. I think I'll readjust the camera just a little bit and get a little more banjo here, or not. Good thing I don't have a Pete Seeger model here. The neck would go through the roof. So here's one I did at the camp, and it was luckily it was always well received, and they didn't realize I was doing it because I didn't want to take a chance on anything else. Tennessee Waltz. I was waltzing with my darling to the Tennessee Waltz when an old friend I happened to see. I introduced him to my darling, and while they were waltzing, my friend stole my sweetheart from me. And I remember the night and the Tennessee Waltz. I know just how much I have lost. lost my little darling the night they were playing the beautiful Tennessee Waltz. I remember the night and the Tennessee Waltz. I know just how much I have lost. So I lost my little darling the night they were playing the beautiful Tennessee Waltz. Oh, the beautiful Tennessee Waltz.
Very nice. Famous Tennessee Waltz is played by Eddie Collins on the 5-string banjo. Eddie, it's been fun talking to you. I haven't seen you in person, I think, since all this craziness began, but it's been a real pleasure. Glad to hear you're busy with music as always. And to our listeners, I want to say thanks so much for watching. You know how to get in touch with Eddie, eddiecollins.biz. You can find out all about him there and on his Eddie Collins Music YouTube channel. Don't forget, AFTM now has a YouTube channel, and we have a web page where we've got a new tradition of getting a new photograph up every day of some fine AFTM event from the past. So thanks everybody for watching. Thanks to Eddie Collins. Thanks to Chip Bach for producing this event. My name's Gary Mortensen. We'll be with you again in just a few days, I'm sure. Goodbye.